Although this symposium is known as an AGS event, our partnership with the Earth Institute really makes it a joint effort. 6 years ago, we held our first symposium here at Columbia University. We are indebted to Dr. Robert Chen, Ms. Jennifer Genrich, Ms. Vilma Gallagher, Adrian Kenyon, and Pamela Vreeland, all from the Earth Institute, who work so closely with the AGS staff throughout the year to pull this event off. Thank you, everybody at the Earth Institute. So now, our next presentation will be a panel on the natural world and the border, which will be moderated by AGS counselor Dr. Antoinette Winkler-Prinz. Before we do that, though, let's listen to Mr. John Davis, the Executive Director of Rewilding Earth, as he tells us about nature and the border.
Thank you very much to the American Geographic Society for inviting a perspective on what borders mean for wildlife. I'm proud to represent here Rewilding Earth, which is an online publication at rewilding.org. I have a few copies of an anthology for any of you interested, our first annual anthology. A point I would like to convey is that borders matter for our wild neighbors as well as our human neighbors, and often they matter in harmful ways. If we are actually to preserve and restore our countries and our planet's great natural heritage, we need to think beyond boundaries. We need to protect wildlife habitats across boundaries. We need to avoid erecting barriers to wildlife movement along boundaries. If we want to restore North America's biodiversity particularly, it has been suggested by the great conservation leader Dave Foreman, we would do well to think in terms of continental wildways, continental scale wildlife corridors. These are the ones that Dave Foreman mapped many years ago. I am urging Dave to do a new map, adding a Great Plains wildway or a shortgrass prairie wildway inspired by Deborah Popper and Frank Popper, whom many of you know. The basic premise of the Rewilding Institute and Wildlands Network is that we need to protect habitat connections at a large scale. We need to restore keystone species, particularly top carnivores, and we need to restore degraded habitats wherever possible. More and more of the scientific community feels that we need to protect at least half of Earth's terrestrial and aquatic ecosystems if we are to preserve the full range of biological diversity. We especially harm wildlife when we build physical barriers to their movement. Physical barriers may mean dams on rivers, they may mean roads, which of course for us represent connections, but for wildlife too often represent barriers. And barriers can mean physical walls. Here, this is the infamous wall along the US-Mexico border, which I will editorialize, does not stop drug traffic, but does stop wildlife movement. I hope someday Mexicans and Americans will stand together at that wall and say, Mrs. President, tear this wall down. Among the species harmed by the border wall, the jaguar, just depicted a moment ago, Mexican wolf, ocelot. Here is a scene from southern Arizona, right near where the border wall is to be built. And again, that will stop the movement of jaguars, ocelots, Mexican wolves, and other wide-ranging animals. This is a photograph of an ocelot. One of the really encouraging things that's happening in conservation is that wildlands philanthropists are buying and saving land and restoring the missing species. This is an area in southeast Arizona and northeast Sonora where ocelot and jaguar and Mexican wolves are actually doing relatively well because of the wildlands philanthropy work of Valere Austin, who's been buying and saving land and at the same time opposing the building of the wall along her boundary. Mexican wolf shown here, again harmed by the border wall, and another species that transcends boundaries. If wolves are to thrive, they need to be able to roam great distances, roads and walls get in their way. Again, inspired by Deborah Popper and Frank Popper, some of us have been advocating for taking down the fences in the Great Plains and restoring the missing species. Here's a wonderful conservation success story. Southern Plains Land Trust, southeast Colorado, has been buying and saving land, taking down the fences, releasing bison and other missing species. Very inspiring story about transcending boundaries in a sense. We have a small red wolf population in eastern North Carolina that is artificially constrained. It's held within artificial borders. It's basically locked into the Albemarle Peninsula. Anytime it leaves that area, it is brought back. That program is now under, the Red Wolf Recovery Program, unfortunately, is now under attack from the presidential administration. We should have these wolves and pumas ranging throughout wildways of North America, but we will not until we address the barriers to their movement. Waterways, streams, rivers, and the like are often natural borders for some animals, but they're also travel ways for other borders. So it's important we see borders in the context of our wild neighbors as well as our human neighbors. Roads, again, are often a very serious barrier to wildlife movement as well as causing direct mortality of wildlife. And roads can be mitigated. One of the best things we could do for wildlife in this country and others is put in safe wildlife crossings over and under roads, such as here in Banff National Park, Alberta. Roads do not need to be permanent impediments to wildlife movement if we put proper safe crossings above and below the roadways. And I think I'm going to close because I've already gone over my time, but please, as you think toward borders in 2050, remember our wild neighbors as well as our human neighbors. Thank you very much for your time.